Hallo daar, leuk dat je luistert naar een nieuwe aflevering van F1 Spoiler Alert. En niet zomaar een aflevering, maar een heuse bonusaflevering met een hele coole gast. Recent spraken we namelijk de legendarische race-engineer Rob Smedley tijdens de AWS Summit in Amsterdam. Voor degenen die Rob Smedley niet kennen, hij is misschien het meest bekend als de vaste race-engineer van Felipe Massa in zijn periode bij Ferrari en later ook bij Williams. Uiteindelijk groeide Smedley binnen Williams door als soort head of engineering en stuurde hij het hele engineering team aan. Maar stopte hij met zijn actieve carrière in de paddock in 2018 om zich aan te sluiten bij de Formule 1 Group. Daar is hij op dit moment verantwoordelijk als data en tech consultant voor alle innovatieve projecten die de Formule 1 oppakt samen met AWS, oftewel Amazon Web Services. Wij kennen Amazon Web Services voornamelijk vanwege hun insights die ze tijdens de race laten zien. De prediction voor de volgende overtake of hoe dicht mensen bij de muur rijden. Maar Smedley deelde in Amsterdam een aantal inzichten hoe Amazon Web Services en de Formule 1 samenwerken om nog veel meer projecten samen op te pakken. Zoals bijvoorbeeld het verbeteren van de auto. Kleine waarschuwing vooraf voor onze vaste luisteraars. Smedley zijn Nederlands is helaas niet wat het hoort te zijn. Dus deze podcast is, zoals je zou hebben verwacht, in het Engels. Desalniettemin hoop ik wel dat jullie kunnen genieten van het gesprek wat ik had met Rob Smedley over de impact van data-analyse en al die nieuwe inzichten op ons als fans. Hoe wij de race beleven, hoe wij naar de wedstrijd kijken. Maar ook hoe de teams ermee omgaan, hoe het de sport gaat beïnvloeden in de toekomst. Mijn eerste vraag aan Rob was, hoe kom je nou als race engineer uiteindelijk als tech consultant terecht bij de Formule 1?
But I mean, my background was, as you said, it was working within the teams, and as an engineer, various levels of seniority. And then when I left Williams at the end of 2018, I decided that I was ready to take a different path. I could see the progression within Formula One teams was going to be more of the same thing, and I needed a change. So Formula One, it was around the time that Liberty Media had just taken over. And they were really interested in, all types of new fan engagements and especially using data to do that. And then, interestingly, AWS partnered with Formula One, so it kind of seemed like the right time for all this to happen. So I took on a position as director of data systems within Formula One. And we started to look at how we were going to leverage the data and build value from a fan application and a fan engagement point of view. And AWS were really key to that because I think we had to start almost at ground zero. Formula One had a huge amount of data, but it wasn't well curated, it wasn't well stored, it wasn't well normalized, synchronized, all the things that you need to do with data to build the foundations before you can actually do all the sexy bit, which is the analysis and build insights and stuff. So, I took on that position. It was a really interesting position. It was a very, very, I had a very, very clear remit of what I was trying to achieve. And I think, with using the power of AWS, if you like, we've achieved a lot of that. It's been a really good journey.
So for us as fans, the partnership with AWS is most prominently displayed in the insights. So the overlays that we get on our television screens, the insights that you share, like the tire degradation or the how many laps to the next overtake or the how close to the wall that we saw in Monaco last time out. But the partnership with AWS and Formula One is much broader than that, right? So there's also things going on behind the screens using those data technology, those data analytics and all those machine learning to further improve the sport and even further improve cars. Could you give an example of that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I, the 2022 car was implemented, basically the way that started was we decided that what we wanted to do was have a centralized support for the FIA, if you like, in designing the new 2022 car. And that was built, that was all down to fan engagement. So we were trying to engage fans more through better racing and the racing that the fans were asking for at the time and still are, was more wheel to wheel racing, not so much overtaking, but so that the cars could follow more closely together. So within Formula One, we started to design a Formula One, like the new generation of Formula One cars, which would allow for better following. So if you can imagine off a Formula One car, I don't know how much you know about it, but from a Formula One car, because they're so driven by aerodynamics, the performance is so driven by aerodynamics, then there's like an aeroplane. So off the back of the car, there's what's called an aerodynamic wake, and that's really it's very, very turbulent air, which means that the car that follows really struggles with its performance and downforce. So we started to design a car that had an upwashing wake, so that the wake that come off the car in front, if you like, would wash over the car behind, and give it significantly less deficit in terms of its aerodynamic performance, and therefore it would be able to follow closer. To do that, we had to design it in an aerodynamic simulation tool called computational fluid dynamics. And the thing about computational fluid dynamics, it's built on like a finite element system. So it's very, very heavy on compute power. So the teams deploy that type of technology, and we started using it centrally within Formula One. But because the compute power for a 2-car simulation is so large, it was taking about 4 days to do each design iteration. So with AWS, we worked with AWS and we built all of the CFD analytics within the cloud structure, and we then started to get that with various uses of technology and various the working group, the Formula One aerodynamic working group and the AWS working group. We got that down to something like 6 hours. So we went from 4 days per design iteration to 6 hours. And if you look at how long it would have taken to design this new generation of Formula One cars, it would have been something like 100 years to do it, to get it to the maturity of design that we got it to. And we did all of that in about 5 months, thanks to, AWS coming in and really helping us with that. So that's been a massive success story of the partnership. As well as the F1 insights, the data that we already talked about, using that data. So it's there's lots of examples like this, but that's one of the success stories of the partnership so far.
Wow, just to imagine going back from 100 years to 100 years of development to just 5 months of development, that sounds like an amazing time saver.
Yeah. And I think that you saw, as a success, we introduced that car. The teams introduced their versions of that car in 2022 and 2022 season, and definitely from all of the metrics that we were able to measure. And then, from anecdotally, from talking to the drivers as well, certainly when I talked to the various Formula One drivers, all of them said that it was much easier to follow now. It was much more like a junior formula race, like a go-kart race, where there's much less effective aerodynamics. And because it was much easier to follow, then you started to see this much closer racing.
Yeah, definitely. I think we can all recall the 2022 season opening in Bahrain with Verstappen and Leclerc overtaking each other, I think 5 times or something. So we saw a lot more close racing in the races that followed. Maybe not so much this year, certainly not at the top of the field, but who knows what the rest of the season will bring us.
You should be very happy, I think, listening to your accent.
Well, I think it's safe to say that the love of the Dutch racing fans is spread among all of the teams in the paddock, not just Max or Red Bull, but also, we have a lot of Mercedes, McLaren, AlphaTauri, or other fans, Williams fans as well, of course. Okay. So, but it is, of course, a treat to see a Dutch driver performing so well in the sports. It's something that a lot of old-time fans couldn't have ever hoped for, and now to have someone performing that well, it is still something special to hear the Dutch anthem on a Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, of course, and he deserves it as well. He deserves it, and the team deserve it. They're doing a great job.
Yeah, agreed, and lovely to hear. And I agree. I think they're doing a splendid job as a team as well. Which triggers me is it something that we're talking about insights and data and all those data points? Are teams using these AWS data points, data insights, the stuff that you guys are collecting and analyzing? Are they using it in their strategies or in their approach to the race weekend?
Well, no, not really. The point here is that what we're doing in Formula One, like in the centralized league Formula One, is really where we're emulating what the teams have been doing for many, many years. So all of the teams have access to all of their own car data, if you like. In Formula One, the league, it's different because we have access to a subset of all of the car data, plus the timing data, plus the weather data, tire data, circuit data, metadata. So the teams have always had access to all of this. And ever since, I started in Formula One, that was really the generation that started to really, double down on the use of data to create analysis and insight, and in the team's case, to drive, to drive towards a faster Formula One car. I think in with what we're doing now centrally in Formula One is we're kind of, me, my team, AWS, we're taking the data that has always been available in Formula One and we're emulating what the teams do, but doing that, with AWS. So we're bringing in much more machine learning, much more artificial intelligence, much more use of cloud and cloud technology. So that, and we're doing that for fan engagement. We're doing that to kind of tell the stories of, explain, in simple terms, how race strategy works, how competitor analysis works, that type of stuff. Teams have been doing that for years, and they do that for their own motives of trying to find a competitive advantage. This is the first time, though, that, with AWS's help, we're able to bring that out into a wider forum, that type of analysis and that type of data, and use it to show the fans, what goes on behind the scenes.
And these are, of course, the AWS insights, the data visualizations that we see as a fan projected on our screen, the how many laps to an overtake, the how close to the wall, the top speeds and stuff like that.
That's right, yeah.
I always wondered, how do these things come together? Who comes up with these new insights? And every season has brought a new insight to the fans. Is it something that you guys come up with? Is it something that comes from within the drivers to share with the fans? And how do these things come to be?
Yeah, so I mean, we mentioned at the top of the call that I think, I'm the brand ambassador for the AWS and Formula One partnership, but then I was director of data systems within Formula One. And latterly, we have a team of engineers. My business has a team of engineers. They're all ex-Formula One engineers that work within Formula One and within this group. So it's a bit of a mash between Formula One, the data systems departments of my old department, plus then some consultants from outside. So my team from Smedley Group, and AWS themselves. And then, everybody, we, in the recent past, I guess, because me and my team, we've got that very keen knowledge of Formula One technical environment, then we have probably been the ones that have brought a lot of this to Formula One themselves to say, well, look, this is how we would kind of analyze this in the team, and this is the type of insights we would be looking for during a race or during a qualifying session. And then Formula One takes those and they use them. We kind of put a lot of ideas on the table at the start of the year, and then those guys will put some of their own ideas in there, and the Formula One will put some of their own ideas in there, and in the end we end up with like 3-4 insights that we're going to do per year. And then and then we'll go away and design all of the models and design all of the simulation tools that are needed to be able to analyze these insights in real time. And that's how, the insights are kind of born. During a race weekend, it's very much like, if you can imagine, to get an insight onto live TV, it's very much like a Formula One team in that there's a group of analysts that are all working in the background, all looking at various situations that happen and saying, "Oh, right, okay, there's an insight here that we can use to explain this particular scenario that's unfolding during this event." So again, we support on that, and the main feature, if you like, is in this case is not the car itself, like it would be in a Formula One team, the car and driver, but the live broadcast. So we say, right, okay, there's this happening on screen, but behind, there's around the track, there might be something else that is unfolding, and we can use the data insights, the suite of data insights that we've got, to be able to explain that better to the fans.
So it's more about adding a layer of storytelling on top of the race, so to speak. I'm curious. You already mentioned that the sport is heavily data-driven. I mean, each race weekend generates terabytes, maybe even petabytes of data. And you use AWS and AWS technology and the AWS insights to visualize, analyze all that data into insights for the fans, engaging the fans more. The current thought seems to be more insights, more engagement. Do you think there's a scenario possible where too much insights, too much data visualizations and insights to the fans will actually hurt the fan experience and the fan engagement? I mean, if race fans are able to predict race outcomes halfway through or 3/4 along a race, it will actually hurt the engagements. What's your thought about that?
I think you've got to. It's a really good question. You've got to do it responsibly. So you've got to feed the fans data and insights, and more importantly, with what we're talking about here, forecasting, so simulating scenarios. You've got to do that in a responsible way. You can't just kind of do it in a way that you expect everybody, all of the fans, to be physicists and engineers and that type of thing. But what I would say is that in terms of giving the fans too much data, that it doesn't really worry me, and I'll tell you why it doesn't worry me, because it's a very personal experience. Because I think my experience is as an engineer who sits on the pit wall and has had, petabytes, looked through petabytes of data, during my career doing that. I've never once thought that I had all the answers. In fact, it's like everything, right, in life. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. So I think that, by giving the fans much more insight and doing it at the right time, we can't fill people's screens full of numbers and insights and plots and traces, because that would just, but for me, that's the best way to watch Formula One. But I'm one of a rare breed. We've got to talk to our 500 million fans, right? Not to one or two people like me. And so you've got to do it in a responsible way, that we're kind of storytelling at the right time and managing to engage the fans at the right time. But I don't think we're ever going to be in a situation where we're giving them too much information and they say, "Oh, now I can predict the race." We can only ever forecast things. We use machine learning and we use stochastic models, deterministic models, quasi-static simulations, dynamic simulations. We use all of those tools to make forecasts of what's going to happen. But that doesn't mean to say that we're predicting the future. We're just giving you a forecast. And I think when you give the fans that type of forecast and tell them something really interesting is coming up, I think what tends to happen is it gets them more engaged because it's more edge of the seat stuff. So when you tell them there's a really cool event like overtaking or something like that, and we're predicting that's going to happen in 10 laps time, that means that they're tuned in, right? They're watching that whole thing unfold rather than it's suddenly in 10 laps time it's sprung upon them. So I'm pretty cool with it. I don't think, I think we've been doing this now for 5 years, and never once have the fans, as any demographic of fans, turned around and said, "This is too much information. You've made it boring for us." They're kind of telling us that this is much better, and we've got much more insight into Formula One now.
That actually triggered me, Rob. I was wondering, if you are watching an F1 race, is it like Neo looking at the Matrix? I mean, do you look at a race with all the possible data that you have at your disposal? And are you looking at it as a race engineer, looking at all the data and the scenarios and planning a race ahead? Or are you looking as a regular fan, just watching the linear feed and enjoying what's being shown on television?
No. Not after 25 years. I mean, I've got no idea what's going on. If I just watch the linear feed, it's like, it's too difficult to understand what actually is happening. So, no, when I watch Formula One, I've got to have everything like in front of me so that I can understand it. I get too nervous otherwise. I get too wound up and too agitated because I don't know what's going on. I mean, it's so difficult to understand, right? As soon as the cars start to do their first rounds of pit stops, I've got no idea what's going on because you don't know what tires they've gone on to, when they're going to stop, when they're going to stop again. So you kind of have this at the start of the race, you know what the order is. After the last pit stop, you know what the order is. The bit in the middle for me, it's quite hard to keep up with. So I like to have all of the data screens and watch it like that, definitely.
Oh, I can certainly see that recognizable for some of our listeners getting plugged in and getting their hands on as much data as possible to enjoy a race. I think it's very recognizable for some of us. Going back to the roots of the sport, Formula One has always been seen as the birthing room for technology and innovation in the automotive industry. And I'm curious, with the rise of data technology, machine learning, algorithms, and cloud computing, could we see a similar process going on where all of this infrastructure and data technology that you're building will be implemented in another sector, businesses, for instance? Will we see F1 as the birthing room for data technology in the near future?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that Formula One has always been a sport, as you just said, that uses the fact of the competitive element of Formula One to drive technology and to drive new technology. And I think it will continue to do that. And interestingly, with all of this new technology that we're using now, in terms of data analytics, generative AI, artificial intelligence in general, there's such a thirst to move things forward. There's such a hunger in Formula One to move things forward at the fastest possible rate that we can, that you see that a lot of the methodologies that we deploy in Formula One are then completely transferable to other businesses. And in fact, I speak with leaders from other business sectors all of the time. Financial sector is a good example. And they are finding that they're learning a lot from us now. We're transferring a lot of our way of working, the way that we the huge amounts of data that we transfer. It's very analogous to the financial sector. And the way that we analyze and kind of break things down and get, these huge, amounts of data, petabytes of data from all sorts of disparate sources, and then package them up into really neat insights that help us to run our business. And our business is, it's either fan engagement from Formula One, the league, or it's making fast Formula One cars for the teams. But it's exactly the same as a banking industry, isn't it? It's the financial industry, is that they've got all of this data coming in and they're trying to break that down into clean, crisp insights that help them to run their business and make better decisions. It's exactly the same concept. There's no difference whatsoever. And I think this is where, we're working outside of Formula One with AWS and going into different sectors, into AWS customers to improve their data journey as well.
Yeah, definitely. You're a busy man today, Rob, and I'll have to let you go after just one final question. We already touched briefly on your inner fan experience when you're watching a race for yourself. I'm curious, from within that inner fan perspective, would you say that F1 is still about the smell of burning rubber and rumbling engines and hot tarmac? Or are we moving more and more into a world of real-time data analysis and smart algorithms, machine learning, and super fast silicon?
Well, I don't think Formula One will ever lose its DNA. I don't think it will ever. I don't think we'll ever move away from that particular DNA of burning rubber and humans, driving the cars, racing drivers. They're the gladiators, right? I would hope that in the not too distant future, we might have a bit more diversity in the driver pool, especially in terms of gender diversity. But let's see, because it is a meritocratic sport. But apart from that, it should never ever change its DNA in terms of it being a sport. But the use of technology does change Formula One. If you look at a Formula One car from the 1960s, 1950s compared to Formula One cars of the 70s, 80s, they changed immeasurably, right? They had it was just at the advent they were taking on starting to use more exotic materials such as carbon fiber. It already become an aerodynamic formula, tire science, and tire performance had changed immeasurably. And Formula One will always continue to do that. We'll always embrace the latest technology to give a competitive edge, or to build a better sport, whatever it is. So I don't think that's ever going to change. But the DNA of Formula One will always be the same. That will never change. We'll always just have 20 plus drivers charging round in these fighter jets that go around a racetrack rather than in the air, and produce a great spectacle on a Sunday afternoon.
En daarmee kwam er een eind aan het leuke gesprek dat ik had met Rob Smedley, die ik misschien nog wel 1001 vragen had willen, kunnen, misschien zelfs wel had moeten stellen. Maar hopelijk hebben we binnenkort Rob nog eens een keer achter onze podcastmicrofoon om hem dan nogmaals eens het spreekwoordelijke hemd van het lijf te vragen in een volgende bonusaflevering van deze podcast. Mocht het onderwerp van data-analyse en data analytics in de sport, visualisatie in de sport, je aanstaan, dan heb ik goed nieuws voor je, want er volgt nog een tweede bonusaflevering van F1 Spoiler Alert vanaf de AWS Summit in Amsterdam. Daar sprak ik onder andere ook met Luc Victor. Hij is de Principal Sports Technology Advisor bij Amazon Web Services. En in zijn hoedanigheid helpt hij teams, clubs en media met het vertellen van verhalen via data, mensen en technologie. Nou, ook dat is een heel leuk en interessant gesprek geworden over Formule 1, maar ook over andere sporten waar datavisualisatie een belangrijke rol speelt. Voor nu, bedankt voor het luisteren naar deze speciale bonusaflevering van Spoiler Alert. Fijn dat je het hebt volgehouden. Helemaal tot hier achter in de eindcredits. Zoals altijd, je kent de drill intussen. Kun je ons bereiken met ons meediscussiëren over de Formule 1 in onze Telegram chat. Dat is de F1 Spoiler Alert chat op Telegram. Maar je kunt ons natuurlijk ook vinden op sociale media's zoals Twitter en Instagram onder F1 Spoiler Alert. Mocht je Marjolein of mijzelf een berichtje willen sturen via Twitter, dan kan dat naar @Marjolein met een lange ei. Of natuurlijk Johan Voets met een lange oe. Voor nu bedankt voor het luisteren en tot de volgende F1 Spoiler Alert.